Okay, good. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the System Fusion Forum. I'm Mark, WB9QZB, your moderator and the founder of this forum. 2015, I got the first Fusion Forum scheduled. It was on a Sunday morning, and I'm figuring, who's going to show up on a Sunday morning at the old Hare Arena? There were 200 people in the room, and I was like, oh, wow, there's something going on here.
Wait.
Yeah.
All right, everybody count off.
Yeah, right. So, and I also created in September of 2013 a Yahoo group, which became a System Fusion group. It's now a groups.io group, System Fusion, all one word. So if you aren't a member of my group, the System Fusion group's got about 3,000 members. We've got a continuous logs and message logs ever since the last 10 years now. So we've been doing this forum since since Dayton of 2015. And it's had a variety of formats over the years. A lot of it's been, what's going on with Fusion and what's going on with Yaesu and, what are the new products. And we're going to take a little bit different tack this year. And this year it's going to be more of an educational session where John's going to delve into various topics, and of course we'll take Q&A as well. But hopefully you'll find this useful, this format useful. I think we're at that maturity level of Fusion now where we're beyond what is it, and we're at that point where what can we do with it and how can we do it. So that's the purpose of the education. And I think you'll find it very interesting, useful. I know a lot of people have got radios, there's a lot of repeaters around the country now. But what more can we do with it, and how can we do it? So I'll turn it over to John, and you're in good hands with him.
All right, so I've counted 1,843 people in here. No, I don't count myself. I have a big enough head, so I count as two. All right. How many were here in 2018? Okay. And you all freely admitted it. That's good. All right. What we're going to talk about is we're going to go back in time, like Sophia Petrillo. Anybody get that reference? Okay, I like you all then. Okay, good. All right, we're going to go back in time because 2018 we were here and we introduced a new concept. Does everybody remember what that concept was? Don't all say it at once. Okay, PDN functionality. We introduced that. Does anybody know when the first Wires X activation took place? Does anybody know that one? Okay, it actually took place in 2014. Now, Wires X, we'll go to a quick history about it. Wires X was a continuation of Wires 2. Did anybody use Wires 2? Okay, that's usually the response we get. Okay, Wires 2 came out back in the days of you've got mail, right? And what it was a pretty cool concept where we could use the dial-up internet and be able to connect repeaters together. Now, this wasn't in digital. There was no such thing as digital at this time. What it was is saying we're going to take actual repeaters, or we could use a device connected to a radio and connect the two together. And what we did is okay, well, let's even back up. How many people have like an FT60 or a VX6 or an FT2980? Does everybody notice what I'll go ahead and call the Big Bang Theory logo on it? How many people have accidentally pushed that button and heard that annoying beep and want to throw your Yaesu radio through the trash? Call me and give me explicit terms that made me even blush, all right? So what that concept was Wires 2. This is all leading up to it. Go with me. What the concept of Wires 2 was is that every time your radio would key up, it would send a DTMF code. And that quick DTMF code, that annoying beep, and wouldn't let you talk right away, was to go ahead and have you going through a device that, let's call it a node, or a repeater, and based on what you had entered, would determine if you're going to go from your node or your repeater to another repeater or node, or to a sister group, is what we called it. And a sister group was a collection of nodes or repeaters, or nodes and repeaters together, that would go ahead and allow you to communicate with one another. Now, the cool thing about Wires 2 was, one, it was actually invented by our tech department in Cypress, California. They went along and they said, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And does anybody want to guess what the model number of the device you needed to use was called? An HRI 100. Yeah, that's why we have the HRI 200. We didn't spend a lot of money on that naming department. Okay, so what we did though is that it actually stood for Human Radio Interface. That's what the HRI stands for. So go back to your clubs and be full of knowledge now. And what it did basically was it said, okay, when I push that DTMF button, and the reason we used DTMF back at times because there was really no other signaling, right? There was just DTMF. And that allowed you to connect together based on what you wanted to do. So it really allowed you to steer your node or your system to who you wanted to connect with it, and on a per key up basis. So if I wanted to talk to my friend Bill, okay, and I knew Bill's node number, I could go ahead and program in the memory in the radio and then turn it to Bill's and then push that wires X button, or wires 2 button, and then anytime I'd go ahead and key up, it would be like, dee-dee-dee, and then all of a sudden, it would connect my node or repeater to his node or repeater. But now if Bill and I wanted to bring in the whole group, we simply change it. Now when I keyed up, he would belong part of that group. Well, the issue that Wires X needed to solve, and this was an issue, was that when Fusion came out, and still is today, it's considered an illegal form of repeater operation in Japan. Wonder who got involved with that one, but what anyways, that's another story. But also, you can't use a Fusion repeater on the air in Japan. It's illegal, okay? But you can use Fusion as a means of communication, okay? Now, the way to do that was to come up with a connection system. Well, we took Wires 2 and we said, hey, let's go ahead and just extend it. Now, the reason we call it Wires X instead of Wires 3, we spent some money on the marketing on this, was because we said what we're doing with Fusion, and that's why we call it Fusion, is we're fusing, we're crossing the two types of technologies together, analog and FM. How many people have or use a Wires X node in here? Okay. How many people use a Wires X node in analog? Okay. How many people use a Wires X node in digital? Okay. So if you want to talk to the people in analog, everybody in Wires X and digital must go to analog. Is that fair? No. And everybody wants to use Wires X and the analog talking to digital people, all the analog people have to go to digital. Is that fair? No. That's the whole one of the concepts of Fusion, is to be flexible and versatile in its usage. Now, where am I going with this? Well, in order for it to work, we couldn't do the sister group and things anymore. We had to change it. And the reason we had to change it was because the technology needed a transcode. Yes, we were the first ones that did transcoding, because the Wires X system itself allows analog users to come into the system, and it will take your analog signal and through the network transcode it to digital. And this is why you can actually have analog and digital users together in the same room. That took a different concept of how we had to do. So we couldn't do nodes and sister groups anymore, and that's where we came up with the concept of nodes and rooms. Now, with that being said, when Fusion first came out and Wires X first came out, what you had to do is you had to have, anybody know, HRI 200, right? You had to have a mobile radio, no handhelds, but a mobile radio. And then what was the fun thing that everybody likes to do? What else did you have to do? Registering, no one likes registering, right? But what else did you have to do? Ports. This impacted me greatly, because when I started working for Yaesu, it was like, okay, I'd go out to California, great, but how do I talk back to my home? How do I talk back to my friends on Wires X, where I live in Wisconsin? Northern Wisconsin, by the way, so just bear with me sometimes. All right, so with that, it was like, how do you do that? Well, the problem is you got to go ahead and have a global non-NATed IP address. You have to go ahead and have ports open. You have to go ahead and have a computer. You have to have a mobile radio. You have to have a power supply. You have to have an antenna. Now, how many people are staying at hotels? Okay, so homework, go down to your front desk tonight and say, hi, I need a global non-NATed IP address with the following ports open. First of all, they're all looking at us weird because we got antennas, right? Okay, so, it didn't happen. It wasn't going to work. So we said, how can we expand Wires X? How can we make it more versatile and flexible? So 2018, we came here and we talked about the PDN concept. And so the PDN concept was simple. You could take a device, handheld or mobile, and you connect it with a cable. And when you connect that cable to the PC, you can talk on wires X. And just like Monty Python, there was much rejoicing. Yay. Okay. But then a few of you, all right, went along and said, John, great idea, you're an idiot. I thought I was at home with my wife. All right. So I said, why are we an idiot? They said, just digital only? And I said, well, okay, what would you like? Well, can I talk to any room? Well, no, in theory, you can only talk to digital only rooms. Well, that's not really fusion, is it? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. And then someone said along and they said, so how do I have to talk to this radio? Well, you have to use another radio. Oh, so I can use like a analog radio. Well, no. You got to use a digital radio. Okay. And then they said, well, what if I don't have a digital radio? You're killing me, Smalls. All right. So what would you like to see? So you gave us a lot of good, constructive, friendly feedback. And then what ended up happening was I took all this back to Japan, and I got yelled at. But it's okay. It's okay. I survived. And then we looked at it, and if you remember, we talked about it in May, but does anybody remember when PDN came out for the masses? Christmas 2018. Now, the reason it came out at Christmas 2018 is because by the time we got back in June, July, August, September, October, and then part of November, we redesigned PDN functionality for you. We went along and we said, let's not just do digital. Let's have people connect to mixed mode rooms. Hey, great idea. What if we don't have another radio to talk about? Well, we'll create another mode. Well, what we'll do? Well, you can use PDN as the radio, as a glorified speaker microphone. You just don't have to use another radio. And there was much rejoicing. So then what happened is that we tested it out. Any law enforcement in here? Anybody that wants to admit they're law enforcement? Okay, all right. So because I had a great adventure at LAX, not that going to LAX is not an adventure, but whatever. I had a great adventure at LAX because one of my jobs was you have to go out and break it. Great. How do I break it? Test it, do it, right? One of the coolest things about PDN is any connection works to the internet. You don't have to open up ports. You don't have to forward ports. You don't have to do any of that whatsoever. You just need an internet connection. So I had to test it. And I tested it at Starbucks. And it worked. Coffee is to be desired, but hey. So then I went to Dunkin' Donuts. It worked there too. All righty? I went numerous places, home, everything like that. But one day I'm sitting in LAX, and I said, you know what? Here's a good idea. I'm going to test it at LAX internet. So picture it, a white, robust man who does not like the heat of California, sweaty, sitting at the terminal with a computer connected to a radio with a bunch of wires. You would be surprised at the amount of law enforcement that comes to greet you. And thank God in the heavens almighty or whoever, one of the LAX officers happened to know me because he was a ham also. And he was a Yaesu fan. I'm undercover. And he's like, I know this guy, it's okay. And I explained it to him, and then I was still able to board my plane, and I'm not on a list. But the whole, it was proof in point because I came back home and I said, hey, it works. But the cool part about it is it did that, and it was great. So we released it, and we got it going. And a lot of people started jump into it. A lot of people started to buy the cables. We had to teach a lot about cables. We had to do this kind of thing because there's certain things you have to plug in and not plug in to get it to work. The issue then started to come out as time started to go along that we started to see a tremendous growth. And the growth that we saw in it was, does anybody want to guess when? COVID. Yep. About Christmas of 2019, all of a sudden we started to see a lot of people getting it because what you did have to do is you had to register the device if you're going to use it for PDN. But we saw this weird pattern Now, for those of you that don't know or have never had the fun of doing a wires X activation, there is a process to it. It's not under our control, but it's done for a safety purpose. There is a poor guy in Japan who enters these by hand, folks, okay? I feel like they have them stored away in some office somewhere, and that's what I imagined, and each day he's like that. But it is a guy who enters it, and what we do is we check it, because here's one of the things about wires X. Could anybody in their right mind see how people can manipulate it to turn it into a business network? They could easily do that. I will tell you, I have a friend, I try to be the radio police with him, and he's told me how he's modified hotspots to be non-amateur frequencies and uses it for his business. And I'm like, dude, we got ethics and morals going on here, let's stop that. And he agrees not to talk to me about it, and I agree not to hate him. But what ended up happening is that we wanted to keep it an amateur network, so that's why it is. But one of the things that we see coming out of COVID, coming out of here, even at the booth today, people have so many questions. What is direct? What is access? What is this? What is this? How do I do this? How do I do this? So what we're going to talk today is we're going to talk about the first part here. We're going to talk about the connections of wires X, okay? And what we're going to do in this first part here is we're going to go over what cables you need, what devices you need or can use. Now, about 4 o'clock, about 30 minutes or so, we're then going to walk into actually showing you some basic steps of usage of wires X, okay? How many people, just out of curiosity's sake, how many people can actually comfortably say, I could take my handheld, I can handshake with my node, and I can completely control my node remotely? And for those that can't see, there's like 3 or 4 hands that went up. And that's about usually the response. People don't know that you can handshake with it. So that's what kind of our forum's going to be today. And I feel it's kind of a fitting topic because, once again, guess what? 6 years of the presentation. So which type of Yaesu System Fusion mode is the best? False. Digital narrow. Digital narrow, Dunkin' Donuts, downloadable Yaesu podcast. I like The Office. All right. So wires X has 3 types of setups. Okay? First of all, you have to understand that it's designed to be versatile. Do not fear that you need to use all these modes. Use what's comfortable for you. Use what's going to be in your application. So the first mode is going to be connection or wired to a repeater. How many people have a repeater they use which is physically connected to an HRI 200, which is physically connected to a computer? Okay, interesting. Okay. The second one, usage of an HRI 200 as a donor radio. How many people use this? You got an HRI 200 connected to a 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 and shooting the information over the air by RF. Okay? The third one is usage of the SCU kit in the PDN or HRI mode. How many people use that? Okay. And rightfully so, there's more people that are using the PDN mode because that's what it's designed for, right? I'm at my hotel room, I'm able to do my PDN. I'm at home, I can access my repeater via RF. I'm in my basement or, as I do, want to go to other rooms and stuff like that, okay? I will admit, it's because of work, it's not because I'm a geek, but I have 7 wires X nodes and stuff at my house, okay? And I'll tell you how to do that in a little bit. Okay, so this is our current, I want to stress current Fusion product line. The reason I say current is because PDN can be used on the FTM100, the FTM400. It also can be used on the FT2 and the FT3. As a matter of fact, I have an FT2 here. Why do I have an FT2 here? Because it shows the FT2, if you can't sell it on the flea market, it works great as a PDN node. Okay? But as you see, we got mobiles, we got handhelds. Now, can all Fusion radios do PDN operation? Yes or no? No. The FT70 cannot. The reason the FT70 cannot is because if you notice, on the 2, the 3, and the 5, and on the mobiles, you have a dual display kind of concept. That comes into stuff on the back end we're not going to cover on there, that's technical stuff, but that is kind of needed in order to be able to have this be facilitated. The 70 doesn't have that. That's a dual band mono display radio. So, the first type, this is a simple. Now, I omitted the computer, okay? I didn't because I couldn't find a computer picture I like, so bear with me. All right, so HRI 200 goes to repeater. Simple connection, comes with the HRI 200, it's the gray cable, it's 10-pin DIN on both sides. You plug it into the HRI 200, you plug it into the repeater, you put the repeater in HRI mode or wires X mode, what this does, and this is important to understand, is when you put the repeater into wires X or HRI mode, it turns the brain of the repeater off. Everything you'll need to do now comes through the software. That goes ahead and counts for connections of how the repeater is going to operate, whether it's digital or AMS or fix something in and fix something out, whatever. And then it also goes ahead and determines how the wires X traffic is going to be sent down the system. Now I stress this because while repeaters and infrastructure can be multi-mode, wires X carries a ton of weight on itself. And the reason it carries a ton of weight on itself is it goes ahead and says, man, if I'm coming in digital, I need to speak both languages going out. If I'm coming in, you see what I'm saying? So if I'm coming in digital, I need to go digital and analog for the HRI 200. If I'm coming in analog, I need to go both ways. Some people have a hard concept with that because they're like, well, wait a minute, why can't I do both down from my node? Why can't I use the repeater in digital and analog and make it work? Because the network does the transcoding. It doesn't do it at a local level. So just keep that in the back of your mind because we get calls on that all the time. Hey, I have my repeater in AMS, but the analog users can't go down wires X. Okay, open up your software. What do you see? Well, it says this and this for the mode operation. Okay, good. What does it say for wires X? Well, it says digital. There you go. That's why. All right. Now, simple cables, simple connections. Like, again, the black cable, the gray, I said gray cable, but black cable with gray sheathing around it, that's what you need. You're going to take this cable, and you're going to plug it into these holes. All righty? That's it. Now, the back of the repeater has that 10-pin mini DIN, and you're going to use radio 1 on the HRI 200. Don't use radio 2, but radio 1. Now, one of the other things we get calls about all the time, the DR2X gave a feature called IMRS. IMRS is not compatible with wires X directly, okay? That's another episode of Maury. We're not going to cover that today. But I bring this up because if you have an IMRS board inside your DR2X, it uses the same data bus lines as the HRI 200. So if you have an IMRS board installed or buy a repeater and it has it installed and you want to use a direct connection wires X to it, like an HRI 200, you have to turn off that board. Does that make sense for everybody? Because otherwise what happens is the IMRS board takes priority because it's internal. The HRI 200 is external. It doesn't work. All right. So next one, number 2, is going to go ahead and be the usage of a donor radio. Now the reason we call it a donor radio is because much like the DR2X repeater or the DR1X you can use, you have to put the radio into wires X mode. This turns off the internal brains of the radio. While that radio is connected to the HRI 200, the wires X software is going to determine what frequency it receives, what frequency it transmits. Can I transmit digital? If you're using HRI 200, can I transmit analog? Okay, it does all those on there. It does the thinking for you. Okay, and we'll show you that in the software later. So don't worry, don't panic on there. Simple process. Once again, we're just substituting out the radio for the repeater. So you got that cable there, and the cable is going to go in radio 1, and it's going to go in the back of the radio on there. Now, point of reference. To do digital operation with the HRI 200, it must be a digital radio. So you have to have a 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. I say this because we used to say, oh, if it has a 10-pin mini DIN, you could do that. Well, then Japan came out with the FTM 6000 that has a 10-pin DIN on it. So it's like, great. So now, if you want digital, you got to use a digital radio. However, with the HRI 200, you can also use the digital radio as an analog radio. Also, the HRI 200 comes with another cable that's 10-pin to 6-pin. That 10-pin to 6-pin allows you to connect an analog radio only. So think of something that has a 6-pin data packet on there. A lot of radios do, still back in the old days, our radios and other brands. You can use that as an analog radio, but it will not do digital. Okay? All right, so when we go ahead and once again take a look at it, this is that concept of, once again, that 10-pin to 6-pin. Notice the cable is black, not gray, okay? So if you call in, we'll say like, what cable are you using? Are you using the black or the gray one? Because we have people that are saying the cable doesn't work, it doesn't fit. Is it black or gray? What model radio do you have? Oh, I have a 100, it's black. No, 100 gray, okay? And it plugs right into there. Now, before we go on, does anybody know what the purpose of radio port 2 is for? Huh? Another radio for data, right? Is that what you're saying? And that's correct. So remember, Japan doesn't have wires X, or excuse me, repeaters. They have to use wires X. So let's say, imagine, we got a nice tall 8-story apartment complex here. And let's say we put that repeater, or that node on 146.625. Now let's say this other guy over here has an 8-story complex, and he decides to put his wires X node on 146.025, and they link together. Okay, so now you just made an ad hoc repeater. But what happens in Japan is they do a lot of simplex usage for voice channels. But what it is because they have multiple simplex nodes over there, and as you get more towards Asia, Oceania regions and stuff like that, and even a little bit of the UK, a lot of their stuff becomes channelized, so they have certain frequencies used because the band's much smaller. It's like 144 to 146. We're spoiled here with 4 megahertz and 2 meters. But what you can do with that second radio port is if you want to, is you can actually take and put another digital radio. It has to be digital radio in 1 and 2. And anybody notice how the first time you get a radio and you hit that wires X button, it always goes to like an assigned frequency on there? Does anyone remember that? That's because that's the concept of radio 2. I could have a node, you could have a node, like Oprah. You can have a node, and you can have a node, and you can have a node. And we can all be on different voice channels. But what we can do is for the sync channel, the handshake channel, we can be on all the same one. That's what that preset channel is. So all I have to do is go walking by, and I'm like, oh, am I near a node? Boom, I go to one, and my radio is going to handshake with the closest node, and then that's going to move me to the voice channel. I chitty chat and talk. Now I start getting out of the range. Oh, I wonder where the next node is. Well, is it 140? No, 144. No, hit that wires X button to get on that preset. Calls out to radio 2. Radio 2 handshakes it, throws you. That's why when you do the handshake, do you ever notice how your radio goes to VFO? That's the reason why, because it says, oh, okay, go to this for your voice channel. We underutilize that a lot in America. We really do. We take a little bit more of the aspect of like, turn to this channel, do the handshake, and you're good to go. Okay. Now we're moving on to type number 3. Just want to make sure I'm good on time. Type number 3 is going to go ahead and be the usage of the SCU kits for PDN or HRI operation. We're going to get to phylum here real quick about PDN and HRI, so just bear with me. But what's going to happen here is that in this case what we're doing is we're going to be using cables. We're eliminating that HRI 200. We're saying, hey, thanks for playing, get out of here. Okay, I don't want to deal with IP addresses, I don't want to use port forwarding. And we're going to start out first with the mobiles. Now the mobiles are going to go ahead and needing to be used the SCU58 kit. Now the reason it's a kit, I'm sorry, it should be 58 and then the parentheses says 56. I'll get to that in 1 second. So the kit is 58. Now the kit is going to consist of the 2 cables you see up there. The first cable is going to be the USB cable, which is the SCU56 cable. Now, that's one that a lot of people have that's common, plugs into the 10-pin mini DIN in the back of the radio, plugs into the USB on the computer. But when it comes down to this analog versus digital thing now, we need to have that analog stream cut out because the system needs to see PDN and HRI operate a little differently. That's what that other audio cable is in there. So that's why it's a kit. It's the 58 kit that has the 56 cable and what we call the audio pigtail. Now what that means basically is that as you take a look at that bottom right cable is going to go ahead and show you that, well, let's start with the top left, the USB cable. That's going to go plug right into that radio, plug right into the computer. Now what's going to happen with this bottom one, the blue arrow, that plugs into the radio first, and then you plug in the SCU56 cable into that. And what ends up happening, coming off, is going to look like one cable is going to go and have these 2 cables come out, and the other cable goes with the USB. That's going to plug into your computer. And I'll explain that all in just a minute here. Okay, now we look at the handhelds. So the handheld SCU57 kit, which is comprised of the SCU55 cable, which is this cable right here, okay? And then it's also comprised of audio cables and a CT44 adapter. Now the reason we have the CT44 adapter, it goes from the single pin to dual pin, okay? The reason we have that is because there are going to be times where you need to plug in the speaker out of the radio to the mic in on the computer only, and there's going to be times where you have to plug both in to this on the computer. Now, this part here does not come with the kit. This is the answer to a question we get all the time. John, my computer has one of those funky, stupid, single jack things on there. You have 2 cables in one hole. You don't need to be from Northwest Wisconsin to figure out there's a problem, okay? So what this does basically is this is nothing more than a USB sound card. Where's all the all-star people in here? Yeah, your CM108s that you guys have been taking up from us? Yeah, thanks. Okay. Because all you need is a simple USB to speaker microphone jack on there. I bought this one because it was a really good deal and it looks kind of cool. But that's really all you need on there. So same principle. You're going to plug in this USB cable into the side of the radio, and then what you're going to do from things on there is that then you would plug in the CT44 into the cables here, and depending on if you're going to be using access point or direct is going to go ahead and dictate that. So now I've been saying PDN, I've been saying HRI, I've been saying access point, I've been saying direct. People have been leaving. I hope they're going to the bathroom only and we'll come back. What does it all mean? Well, thanks for asking. What it means is the type of operation you're going to use. So PDN stands for Personal Digital Node. Think of it this way. PDN, Personal Digital Node, digital only. That's all you're going to get. Meaning you can only connect to digital rooms. If you try to connect to a mixed mode room or an analog room, it's going to give you heartburn, okay? As I will say, if you see my other presentations, panic, don't panic. That's where we're going to go in here from here on out, okay? HRI, Human Radio Interface, is the ability for you to connect to analog or digital rooms, okay? So PDN, HRI. So now that we know the mode, let's confuse you even more, and let's go to the type of operation. So in each type of operations under PDN and under HRI, we have direct. Direct is basically as simple as it be, is that you are directly using your device. You are using the speaker in here, and you're using the microphone in here. It's going down all these cables, it's going into the PC, goes out to the WiresX network. This is not only common for the handheld, but it's also going to be for the mobiles also. You'll use the microphone on the mobiles, you'll use the speaker on the mobiles, okay? That is what we go ahead and call direct. Access point is what it says. It's an access point. IT people, you'll be familiar with that. That's the little things that hang from the ceiling and everybody tries to hack, okay? That's the situation where now I'm going to take that cable and plug it in with my audio, and using both of the audio cables, plug that in, and it's going to go ahead and allow me to use another radio to talk to it. In this case, when you are in access point mode, it's only going to allow you to use another Fusion radio, okay? So now I could take my FT5, I could take my FT70, I could take a 3, I could take a 2, I could take a 1, I could take any radio and talk to that radio. That's PDN direct and PDN access point. Now, when we look at HRI, HRI has the same thing, direct and access point. The biggest difference is going to be actually with PDN, you technically only need the USB cable. For HRI, you need the USB cable and the audio cables. But John, you just said, I need the audio cables for that. Yeah. The reason we do that is because it all depends on how you boot up your radio, okay? On the 2 here, are you booting up by holding the wires X button and back? Are you holding the wires X button and band? That's going to determine if you're going into wires X mode, or excuse me, if you're going into PDN mode or HRI mode. We always tell people it's a good habit to get into just to do that, but in PDN you only need that. HRI mode, you need both cables. Once again, direct, you're using your radio directly. If you're using it in an access point, you're talking to it. Now, with that being said, there's a couple things to remember, okay? All radios or repeaters must be powered in wires X mode. People hook it up, they think it's going to go to wires X mode, it doesn't work, they call us, they're upset. Hey, what did you do, X and band, or D, or did you do DX and GM, or just DX, what did you do? That's why we go ahead and say, okay, hey, that's what it is. If you're using an HRI 200, you can do digital and FM over the air. So digital or FM over the air. That's only with an HRI 200. If you're using a PDN or HRI mode, not an HRI 200, but an HRI mode setup, you can only do digital via RF. Can't have an analog radio talk to it. PDN can only connect to digital-only nodes or rooms. We'll show you an error later that will pop up, okay? PDN mode requires you to push the wires X button to handshake the radio to the computer. So even though you put it into wires X mode, PDN says, okay, I need to know that I can work with you, work with me, push the wires X button. HRI mode, not HRI 200, connects to digital or analog nodes or rooms. When using HRI mode, you need to use the cables, and here's why. If you don't use the if you don't use the audio cables in HRI mode, analog users will turn on you, because here's what will happen. Their radios will key up, but it will be a dead carrier. And the reason that happens is because, remember, the audio cables here is providing that analog stream. So if there's no audio or analog going from your device into your wires X, the analog users don't have any audio path. It's like a dead key. It's like you cut the microphone element on your mic, but the PTT button still works. We get a lot of calls about that all the time. We even tell it's not good Fusion practice to go ahead and not use the cables. That's why we always tell people, yes, PDN, you only need one cable, but be a good wires X user and just have it as a practice on there. With that is the whole aspect of the connections of wires X. It's not that difficult, it's not that hard. I'm going to tell you to do this. I know we don't want to do it, especially guys, but download the manual. And the reason being, there's a reason, okay? The reason being is it does go ahead and allow you to look at it at a more granular level than what we did here today. And that granular level in this case is going to say, okay, do I have a mobile? Do I have a portable? A handheld, I should say. Is that handheld going to be in PDN or HRI, or is the mobile in PDN or HRI? And it kind of breaks down that level what it is. It even shows you, we have pictures, nice pictures, not done by me, black and white because I didn't color them, but nice pictures that show, plug this cable here, plug this cable here, and you will be good to go from that point there. All right. Before we move on to the software, does anybody have any questions on what we've covered here so far? So the question was, it says, hey, I only got the one SCU cable hooked up. I don't have the audio cables, I just have the USB cable hooked up. That would be what we would consider PDN mode, okay? And in that case, that's the only time you need that. But remember, if you're in HRI mode, you're not going to be sending any audio down to those analog users. And there are a fair amount of analog users on wires X. I will show you. I will show you the hint and the trick to know if the node you're looking at, the room you're looking at, is actually analog or digital for it on there. Okay? Any other questions? So the question that was asked, well, John, if HRI mode allows you to go into analog to digital rooms, why would I need the HRI 200? Because the HRI 200 is what actually hosts your room, okay? How many people are familiar with Fusion reflectors, like YSF reflectors, FCS reflectors, those kind of things like that? Okay. That's a complete different concept of what Wires X is. So what Wires X is what we call a centralized and decentralized system. Yes. The reason I say it that way is because think of Wires X. When you pull up the screen, we'll show you here. It's kind of sort of like the guest list, right? Can you come into the party or can you not come into the party? It's also kind of like a phone book, right? Every room or every node has a node number or room number. I enter that number in to connect to that node or room. But what ends up happening is the HRI 200 hosts the room. So when I'm in the Wires X network and I connect to a room like I will here, I'm not going like a YSF reflector to a server and then my traffic's broadcasted out there. I'm going directly via the internet to that HRI 200. That's why you need the global non-NATed IP address. That's why you also need to have those ports open, because the HRI 200 turns in like a mini server. Does that make sense for everybody? That's the pain, right? We started to find out, and this is another reason why we did PDN. You'll see on there, we can see like, my God, there's so many nodes on, but the list of like rooms was like always like half or less than half of all the nodes that are on there. And then we started to find out people aren't connecting rooms. People are going ahead and just wanting to talk into rooms. And that's why you can't host a room with PDN or HRI. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? That's a good question. So this is sort of a left Twix, right Twix kind of thing, okay? So when the FT991 came out, it wasn't designed to be a fusion like node. It wasn't designed for Wires X. What it was designed for was to be an HF radio that was all mode, all band, so VHF, UHF included, that could transmit fusion. So what we did is on the back of the 991, it's only a 6-pin DIN. What we did is we took the ability to do and operate as a quote-unquote digital node, and we took that technology, pulled it away from there, and we included a sound card for HF digital data modes. So we sacrificed it being used as a digital node, which we didn't think people would want to do, and made it so you can just plug in the USB to do FT8 or RIDI or whatever on there. So that's why I'm like it's a left Twix, right Twix thing, because you can plug it in and use an analog node, but it's like, yeah, so, yeah. Any others before? Yes. So direct and access point are the two types of operation underneath that mode. So you choose, do I only want to talk to digital or do I want to talk to digital and analog? That's your first choice. And then underneath it, do I want to use the radio directly or do I want to use another radio to talk to it? So that's direct versus access point. Anyway, we got one over here.
Hi. If you're going to get the HRI 200, and I'd like you to justify the purchase on it, you would recommend not getting the Ethernet card for the DR2X?
That's a good point. So here's where the concept of the IMRS came in. So he says, do you not justify the extra $200 for the IMRS? What we found out through the DR1X series was that people were putting them in government installations, we'll call it that way, right? And sometimes the government has an issue with the internet from the public coming in and touching their equipment or building. I guess there's been issues. So what happened is we said IMRS does not require the internet. You can do an intranet with it, right? You can run it. I can put a DR2X here, run an Ethernet cable to the back, and we can make it work that way. The reason I bring that up that way is because the IMRS was designed to be a solution for those that didn't want to use Wires X but still could connect digitally. Where Wires X requires the internet, IMRS doesn't. So it's ultimately the answer is going to come down to is what is your installation, what is your design going to dictate? Now IMRS only works in digital voice. You cannot do analog voice on it whatsoever. Wires X, once again, allows you to do both. So that's, once again, a personal preference. Any others? Okay. So we're going to move on to the next part here real quick. The next part is going to be actually doing and working with the Wires X software. Now, the Wires X software at the same time. Alrighty? So I registered the FT2, and it's like 330 001 or something, whatever my node number is. The first time you boot up Wires X ever, it's going to ask you for your DTMF ID for your node and the DTMF ID for your room. That's what we send you in your little email that poor dude in Japan has entered, okay? That's all you need to do. Once the software is registered, okay, with your node and room number, you can use any radio you want. You just see I just did it. The FT2 is registered, the FT2 ID is in the software, but I just plugged in my FT5. Now what does that mean? What it means is that if I use the FT5 now, whether it's in PDN or HRI mode, it's going to show up as others as that node of the FT2, meaning 33301 or whatever number I am, okay? But what's happening is we feel bad. We'll see people, they'll call us, and they're like, oh my God, this is my 7th Yaesu radio I'm registering. Whoa, what do you mean? Well, I want to be able to use them on PDN. Are you going to use all 7 at once? Well, no, okay. And I'm going to say this, we're not like other digital modes, okay? You don't need to register each radio. You don't have to register, get an ID. You don't have to do that. In this case, remember how I said earlier I have 7 Wires X nodes at the house? Okay. I got 3 HRI 200s because my internet company gives me fiber, so I have 4 IP addresses, and then the other 4 are PDNs. A lot of that is for actually testing, troubleshooting, supporting, but if I'm going to have all 3, now every HRI 200 needs that separate address, but with all the PDN, I don't have to do it. Now, how many of you have an HRI 200 as well as a PDN setup? Okay, you guys don't need to register that, change different numbers either. If you have an HRI 200 and today I'm going to go on the road and use the PDN, great. Unplug the HRI 200, bring your laptop with you, bring the right cables, plug it in, you're good to go. But if you're going to be like me at home, I have my HRI 200 feeding my repeater, I have another HRI 200 that I use for analog, and I have my PDN, I need 3 registrations, okay? Does that make sense? I just want to stress that because people, I feel so bad for people that call in and are like, I got to do this, and you're an idiot, and then I said, honey, stop calling. She's a ham too, like an actual ham, like an XYL, not like a ham. All right, so now that's over a lot of that. Now what we're going to do is, we're red again. This is giving heartburn. Don't worry, folks. We got you. We're here to help. Now look right away, put it in there. See how it changed? No more red. We're good to go. All righty. Now, with this being said, the next thing we need to take a look at and we need to know is what mode of operation we're in. Are we in PDN or HRI? And are we in access point or are we in direct? For this case, in this instance, I decided to go with HRI and access point. The reason being is because HRI and access point are going to give me the most options of rooms to connect to. Because I can connect to digital rooms with my HRI mode. I can also connect to analog rooms. Remember, if it's PDN, I'm only in digital. Now, John, you said, how do I know if they're analog or digital? Thanks for asking. On the node list, put that right there for right now. On the node list up at the top, you're going to go ahead and see, off to the left-hand side, you'll see there's a bunch of letters and numbers here. Do you see that? The A stands for, guess what? Analog. The D stands for, guess what? Digital. The Wi-Fi symbol stands for, Nope. PDN or HRI mode. So we lump them together, okay? That's going to go ahead and be able to tell you a little bit more. So like, okay, if I want to connect to, this one happens to be NY4R. If I want to connect to this person in Trinidad, Spain, I know that they're an analog user, so obviously it dictates automatically I have to use HRI mode, right? Okay, this person here, NWRARC1 out of Phoenix, they're digital, so that knows that, hey, I'd have to use PDN or HRI mode, right? And then once again, right below that, JR5YFG from Japan. We're just going to say, I have no idea. Ichi, Shikami, there. That is, they're in PDN mode. Now, let's look down here, okay? Down here, when we get into these kind of things, now we're going to go ahead and have different icons on there. The two icons you're going to go ahead and see are going to be a little house. It's a nice one story, okay? Little house, or the word DIG with what looks like 3 lines coming out of it, and it's got like 3 little red squares. Guess what the house means? Huh? Actually means analog. Guess what dig means? Digital. So automatically it's going to go ahead and tell you that. Now, depending on the color of the digital symbol, and depending on the color of the house symbol, will dictate if the room has someone in it, or if a room has no one in it. So this one is hard to see, but the digital in this case is like a yellowish kind of letters of DIG and a blue, and if you look, it has one person in there. If you go ahead and take a look down here, we'll find no one, because there's a lot of empty rooms here. Here you go. In this case, digital has people in it. This one here, this room right here has no one in it, and the word digital is red. Okay? That goes ahead and kind of tells you, hey, someone's in there, someone's not. Not that you can't look over to the word act for activity. Same thing with the here. So if you see no one's in there, the little house is a light blue, but as you see when the people are in there, it is actually a dark colored blue. Okay? So remember, in the node section, D digital, A analog, little Wi-Fi symbol, it's going to go ahead and be PDN mode. On the bottom, you either have the house, which is analog, or could be mixed mode, or you have digital, which is dig only. Now, a couple things to look at here. Basically, this is your display box on the top. This is what you can set at. Some people have it set for bookmarks. I have it set for me personally when I'm in a room that will always kind of keep a running population list of who has been or who is actually in the room as a user. So if Bill checks in and Bill checks out, it will show that Bill's in there, because your constant box, which I'll show in a minute, doesn't always show who was or was not in there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go, anybody have a room they want me to use? No? Zombie alert? Who said that? No, of course. What's your number? 28290? 28298, okay. Alrighty. So now we're in the zombie alert room. According to the room, we're okay. All right. A couple things pop up on the screen. This lets you know a couple things. So first of all, the first box that's going to pop up here is you can put your little logo in there and stuff like that, but you can actually give a little detail about your room. This is set up in the WiresX software, but thanks for visiting the Zombie Alert Network System, YSF 88240 and XLX, so you can connect it over. And then he has the email address if you want to email him on there. For some people, if you don't want to have that on there, if you don't want to see that on the screen, you can click close. That's not going to close your room, it's just going to take away that screen. Now, this box right here that I'm moving around, okay, this is the current list of users in that room right now. This box here, so remember how I said this one I like to have here? This box will show all the people that have been in the room, even if they're not in the room currently. So once again, if my friend Bill goes ahead and jumps into the room and then he leaves, Bill's node would show up in here. Does that make sense for everybody? So it kind of does that. If you have your own room, you're using an HRI 200, I strongly recommend using that as that reference box for you. That's going to help you out. Okay. Now, you can do that if you saw I connected one of two ways. I connected by, and I'm going to close this out and I'm going to disconnect. So you can do the connect to. So if you know the room number, like he said, you drop connect down to connect to and enter that in there. This is a running total box of here of all the rooms that your nodes you have connected to. There's no way to delete that. It just will eventually delete after time. Alrighty. If you know from the list, if you pick from the list here, so let's say I'm going to go down to, well here, the All Japan CQ Room Digital. So if I know I want to go to that room, I can highlight it once with the one left mouse click, come here, connect to, boom. Now I connected to the room that way. There's no one talking in the Japan room because they're all sleeping right now. But if I close this, remember, I'm not completely disconnected. Still, as you see here, I'm connected to the node here. I still have to go up here, and I still have to disconnect. Now, this brings us to the next box of WiresX software, which is this box here. This box is the output box, all right? If, for an example, the radio became unplugged earlier, look what happened. Digital transceiver error reset code 1050110, okay? What that means is that that's a code. You can tell us that. We can kind of help look it up. But basically what it means is the WiresX software stopped seeing the radio initially used. The next code here was that, hey, there was another radio, but that one got disconnected. You don't need to know those codes. That's a thing that I get to remember or try to. Then it will tell you, hey, call started. This means when a call was initiated to a node or a room. In this case, if the connection is successful, it will tell you the room member and how many nodes are in there. I will show you this, if I want to connect to a room, and 11004 shouldn't be busy. If I connect to that, entry, no ILS on server. Panic, don't panic. Don't panic. What this means is what it's telling you is it's saying, I'm not seeing this node or room on WiresX currently. Doesn't mean anything in particular, doesn't mean the network's down, doesn't mean something. It just means that your WiresX software, when it calls up to the main node and room list, is saying, hey, I'm looking for this node number, I'm not seeing it. And they're saying, the server's replying back and saying, correct, that one is not currently on the network. If you do decide to connect to one here, we'll do another one. Call started. Oh, whoa, 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 what just happened? Panic, don't panic. But the word error is there. We should panic, right? No, don't panic. What that means is connection busy from the node I tried connecting to. What that tells you is basically someone has turned it on, which you can do in the software here, that says when I'm connected as a node to a room, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be bothered with anybody, and that's what that is telling you, okay? One of the things you have to understand with the WiresX software is you do have a lot of function and control at your fingertips. You can make a closed room. You can make an open room. You can make a GM room that will beacon out on there. You can go ahead and say, okay, I have an open room, but when I'm connected to that open room, don't bother me with the node. You can have it that, hey, it will allow a connection to you, even though when you're in a node, once you're done with that connection, your node will go back to the room then. Or you can have it finally set up as, hey, I'm in a room, someone wants to connect to me directly, then after that's done, I go back to an idle state. And finally, you can have a return to a certain room. That's the next one we're going to get, because we're going to dive into the settings here now. So the settings page has a lot of information that you can and cannot change. So first of all, you will never be able to change the serial number of the device you're using. You will never be able to change the DTMF ID of the device you're using. That is set from us at Yaesu, okay? This radio I'm using here will always be 33369. If I want to change the FT2 to the FT5 to be registered with 33369, I got to log into my WiresX account, say I want to submit a change, put the FT5 information in there, and then it gets updated, okay? Call sign cannot be changed, okay? However, user ID can be changed. So, your user ID is restricted to 10 bytes, and a byte is a character in this case. So in this case, the user ID does not have to technically be your call sign. That's why your call sign is hard-coded in there. This can be whatever you want as your user ID, as your node. So if I wanted to say, John is cool, well, actually John-cool, my node now is known as John-Cool, which should have been the first place. But so now when I connect into any room, the zombie alert network was nice enough to see that John-Cool was in his room. Okay? So as you see there, John-Cool is there. So that's that user ID. Now, why is this done this way? This is done for the same purpose as people may say, oh, we may want to call this the repeater 1. We want to maybe reference this. So if you're sitting and looking in your Wires X room, you can see, oh, wait, the node for repeater 1 is in there. You may have, if you own a bunch of repeaters, right? You can't have a duplicate user ID, so I can't be like N9UPC-RPT. Because if I try it a second time, it's going to error out. ID is already in use. So it's not something illegal. Now, if I was to key up, what's going to happen is it's going to show the ID of my radio and the actual node that I'm accessing. So let me turn it on here real quick. And now if you check on the screen when I key up, N9UPC test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So as you saw there, it went along and it's showing the first call sign is going to show the node, so John is cool. And then the second one is going to show the call sign, so showing N9UPC-FT5D, which is my radio on there. Now, if you were to go ahead and say, well, John, how is that legal? Because what I can go ahead and do is I could actually pull up the node information through here. I could request this get info, and I can see who it is. So that's when you're in the Wires X environment, you actually can see who it is on there. But that is how you change your user ID. Now, in addition with that, the user ID in a lot of these functions can only be changed when you're not connected to a node or room. So if I go back here, I'm going to change this. I change this usually to N9UPC-travel. And then once again, I apply. The ID isn't in use. It goes ahead and says ID change complete. Okay, life is good. All right, you can enter a comment about this node. So this says, you know, this is my travel node for work. Now, if you want privacy, you actually can click and say confidential ID. This still will go ahead and have the ID requirements, but you will not be able to pull the data on there. You can't see that this is my travel node for work, where my city is in registering. That's the next thing. City, state, and country are automatically hard-coded in there based on what you put in for your information, which corresponds to your FCC license. Does that make sense? Okay. That's how we validate you. Believe me, we've had Daffy Duck, Donald Duck, Donald Trump, Betty Boop. Who else have we had register? King Siam register. But people try to send false registrations in all the time. Okay. Location services. So location services basically pull the information off of the GPS off of your device. If you have a GPS signal on, it's not getting a GPS signal because we're in here. Or you can manually put that in there if you want to. The reason we offer that option is because if you're going to use this to, remember, feed a repeater, you may be at your house 2-3 miles away, and you want the GPS address of the repeater, so maybe you might put the repeater's GPS address in there instead. Okay, call settings. This is very, very key on here. This is how you can lock your node down tight. So notice I said round QSO room connection on or off. So right now it's checked, and check means on. Okay? And as you saw, and I'll do it again, I will connect with my handheld. I just did the handshake. It says station info to V channel. Now I've done the handshake. Now I can go and I can connect to any room I want by going ahead and operating it through the radio. As you see, I just connected to my room. Okay? I want to go ahead and back out of my room and go ahead and push this. Voila, now I can control it all through there. If you don't want people doing that, because sometimes people will do it. I had a guy, I know who he was, I had to yell at him numerous times. He thought it'd be funny during the night to come into my repeater and I didn't even know this at first, he was doing it. But all of a sudden I wake up one morning and I hear a bunch of British-speaking people. Okay. Northern Wisconsin doesn't have a lot of British people there, okay? So I knew that, first of all, that's wrong, right? So then I went along and took to my Wires X, and I saw I was in a UK room. Okay, not a problem, whatever. But I used my Wires X for linking, so I disconnected. And the next day, I hear someone come back, and they're Scottish. That was a linguistic adventure. And I'm like, okay, why are we in there? So I went along, and I clicked the room out of there. I looked on my right-hand side there because I saw who was connecting, right? I could see that, and I could go into my log here and check who was connecting. And I saw him and said, hey, if you're going to use my repeater, okay, but put the room back. No answer. And the next night, it was Japan. And waking up to hearing Japanese people talk like, oh my God, work found me. So what I did is I said, okay, we need to do that. So what I did here in this case is I went here, and I clicked this round QSO room. Notice how it's unchecked now. Now watch what happens. I go ahead. I'm going to do the handshake. Okay, lets me handshake. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and try to connect to a room. Now it says busy air. Do you see how on the screen now it says call rejected to 21667, disconnected? That's because I unchecked that box. That box says, yeah, I'll let you go ahead and connect to it, but you ain't changing my room. Okay, cool. So if you have people that are using your Wires X node, if you have that kind of thing, that's a way to go ahead and kind of do it there. Now going back under settings here, under call settings. If you leave that checked, that's fine, it's up to you. Now this one says accept calls while in round QSO room. So once again, that's saying, hey, I'm in a room, we're talking, but they want to connect to me directly, they can pull me out of the room if I want to, if I have that box checked. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll get to error like I showed earlier that the call was canceled. Remember, it showed 21667? Because I don't allow that. In addition, back to round QSO after disconnect, that means, okay, I'm in a room talking da-da-da-da-da. Bill wants to connect to me directly to talk to me on the side. Okay, boom. Hey, John, hey, it's Bill, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool, thanks, okay, bye. One of us disconnects. It's going to throw me back to the room that I was just in, okay? Now, this one, let me check these. This one is return to room, which is completely different. So what's gonna happen here, so we're gonna set this, what's gonna happen here in a minute is that this is going to automatically throw me back to room 2100. And what it's designed to do is it's designed that if the room you're connected to goes offline, it's going to automatically try to call back to that room. And then if it doesn't get a response, see, there you go. Just automatically did it on its own. A lot of people do this for like nets and stuff where they're like, hey, we normally sit in our room, but the net came on, or it's coming on at 7. They'll disconnect from their room temporarily. They'll connect to another one, but then when they're done, they just disconnect. And here, I'll even show you again. We'll go up here, connect, disconnect. It disconnected. And then it will see in a minute or two here, it's going to go ahead and try to connect again. This can also be a node. So if you do a node-to-node connection, it doesn't have to be just a room. And it does, and it waits about 15 seconds or so here, because what it's doing is saying, hey, wait, maybe you needed to disconnect because you need to change something or you need to do something. And it's going to give you a little time, and then it will reconnect here in just a moment. Okay, there, so was, close this up here. And there we go. So from the time, let's see, is, try and find it here, disconnect. Oh, did I go up too high? So yeah, so disconnected and then returned to room last 10 count. So it waited, yeah, about almost a minute actually. That once again is under file settings and then call settings, and you can uncheck that too. All right, a couple other general settings on there. This is a big one, is a limited timeout timer. This is not the timeout timer for your transmissions. This is a timeout timer for you being in a room. If your users are connecting to another room and are leaving it connected to a room, this is where you can kind of curb them. The minimum amount of time is 5 minutes. And what this means is that if I connect to a room, I could sit in there for 5 minutes before it's automatically going to time me out and kick me out of that room. Doesn't matter if a conversation's taken place or anything like that whatsoever. It goes ahead and it's going to kick you out. It's going to kick you out. Alrighty? Some people will put that as kind of a watchdog timer on there. Once again, it's not a timeout timer. We can't stress that enough because some people think it's a timeout timer, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, why is it going ahead and doing so long there?" Let me get back over here. Sorry. All right, the general setting, once again, unlimited timeout timer. I leave it that way just because it's just easier that way. Now, some of these settings are grayed out. The reason they're grayed out is because it's a room function or room setting. We're in PDN, remember we can't do that. So a lot of those things are there, connect messages, room in and out messages, those kind of things. Digital ID settings, these are gonna go ahead and be, if you have the HRI 200, you can actually have it broadcast your ID, or you can have it broadcast your voice on there. List files, if you wanna make a file of things to save, like, hey, I wanna see who's always connecting to my room, I can go ahead and do that, okay? I'm sorry, for this one, it's a group window, the activity log, or activity ID, or the room ID. So I could make a list file of this screen up here of all the data that's connected all the time. You have to enable the lists, though. They don't come naturally. You have to enable it, and you have to select where you want to save it. Finally, these are the log files. So if I click node log, I can create a file that will keep track of everybody that I connect to, or connects into here, or anything like that has to do with this node. So if someone talks on the node, it makes that list file. If someone goes ahead and handshakes with it, it makes that list file and everything there. Now the final one I'm going to talk about is control of your radio. Now if you're in PDN mode, you will set the frequency of the radio from the radio, whatever you want to use. If you're in HRI mode, whether it be HRI 200 or HRI, you will need to come to this screen here. This is the transceiver screen. Now normally, if you had an HRI 200, you could select receive digital, transmit digital, or receive analog, transmit analog. Why can I not select analog? Because it's PDN, or excuse me, it's a PDN setup, not in PDN mode, but a PDN setup. It doesn't allow you to transmit FM, okay? This is where you're going to change your frequency. So if I want to change the frequency to whatever, 445, 500, that is where I would do it here, okay? That's where I would go ahead and change it. Whatever you change will not take effect until you click apply and OK. Now, you can set this up as duplex. So if you want to feed a repeater, the way you would go ahead and do that is towards the bottom of the screen here. So you have the DGID if you want to use a DGID on this, but then you have your power settings. So I have high, low 3, low 2, low 1. I always suggest when you're running with a handheld, you keep it like low 1 or low 2. On a mobile, you can do low 1 or medium on there, and that's usually like 5 or 20 watts. Now, how the offset comes in is you have to look at it from how they talk about which is uplink and which is downlink. Uplink meaning the radio's receiving. So what I always tell people is put the frequency, what you're going to receive in here. Your offset then is going to be what you want the radio to transmit at. So if I want to go, let's say 1 megahertz for easy sake of purpose, I enter 1 megahertz tab. Now look down here. It says uplink receive 145.5625. Downlink, which is transmit, that is going to go ahead and be 146.5625. Now if you need to do negative, how do you do negative? Here's what you do. You just basically, when you're entering it, hit the -1. Now it shifts it automatically. You can click reverse, which happens sometimes, and then you'll see it will reverse between the two. But if you just remember, if you enter number only, it's automatically going to be positive. So if you need negative, enter a negative. Now this last one part of here of high frequency settings, that is for this case here. So I'm going to do this here. Hang on a second. And if you take a look, you see how there's some that don't have a frequency listed in there? They, in the frequency box, clicked hide frequency setting. That means that they said, I don't want my frequency showing up on wires X. Because if I take a look at my DTMF ID here, so by the way, if I didn't say it earlier, I apologize. You can sort by clicking username, DTMF ID, and it sorts those columns there. But if I go down to 33369, okay, there's my node right there. Notice how it's showing the frequency that's there. Some people may not want that. So if I'm at the hotel, and I know some of you hackers are there, okay, and I don't want you hopping on my Wires X node, okay, I can hide my frequency from you. It's not going to show up on there, alrighty? And that's totally your option. You don't have to hide it. You don't have to do anything like that on there. So with that, there's a giant drink from the fire hose. I know that. Questions that we have. What do we have here? Yeah, okay, we got one. Okay.
Okay, I might be wrong about this because I kind of gave up on the setup. When I get into the WiresX software, the rooms load up, but on air, it showed it real fast on you. It goes on air locked in red.
He went along on there and he was saying how the on air went red real quick, and you probably saw the local change colors real quick.
Well, my on air stays red.
Your on air stays red, okay. And when you're doing that, or do you have your radio in PDN, HRI mode?
PDN, I only got one cable going in.
Okay, did you push the Wires X button to handshake with the software?
I believe so.
Okay, because that's usually what it is. What it's saying is that I'm not seeing anything I can transmit at. When it's in a gray state like this, it's sort of saying, hey, I'm in a waiting state to receive or transmit. But if it's that red, it says I can't transmit. And that usually is indicative of, within PDN mode, you didn't do a handshake. So it sees the radio, but it's not able to operate the radio.
Okay, and on the FTV5, I just press
The GMX button.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
At one point, you said the radio had to be started in Wires X mode. Could you go over the steps to do that?
Sure. So when you're using a handheld, handhelds are going to be a combination of the radio in a powered off normal state. You're going to go ahead and either push the GM and X button and then the band button, and that will turn the radio on. Keep pushing them, and like this one will say Wires X PDN. That means I'm in PDN mode, okay? Take it out of Wires X PDN mode. You turn it off, hold the same two buttons, and turn it back on again. To put it into HRI mode is GMX and back. That will put it into HRI mode. Now, when you're going ahead and doing that in HRI mode, what's going to happen is that it's going to say Wires X on the screen, and it's going to stay there until it sees the Wires X software. So that's the two big differences on there. Mobiles, a little bit easier. Mobiles, you push and hold the DX button while turning it on for PDN mode. And then for HRI mode or HRI 200 mode, it's pushing and holding the DX and the GM button while turning the radio on. Once again, that's why I say you got to read the manual. Sorry, dude.
Hey, John, you were talking about in your setup, and I'm assuming you were talking about a PDN. Would it be, when you were talking about putting the frequencies of the repeater, is it advisable to put a PDN on a repeater? And what would be the, what would be the use of putting a PDN instead of an HRI?
So the question was saying, hey, about advisability of like, hey, putting a PDN on a repeater or using the HRI 200. It's really, once again, going to come down to two factors. One, do you want to host a room? And two, do you need to transmit Wires X analog? Those are the two factors that are going to dictate whether you use an HRI 200 or you use a PDN setup. PDN is very simple. It's you know, like I said, it's a handheld or a mobile with just the cables only. It's once again going to come down to your personal preference of saying, yeah, I want to feed it over the air versus a direct connection. Some places you can't get the internet at your repeater site. Other places I don't want to have something at the repeater site except the repeater site. There's a whole bunch of different influences per each user that come into play. So I hate to say it, but it comes down to your personal preference.
Put my PDN in one room, put it on my repeater that's linked to the zombie alert. And that other room would actually go broadcasting through the zombie alert?
Correct. Yep. So you can have it at your house, and then you're feeding the repeater over the air, and you're in the bathroom, walking the dog, whatever. You're going through that repeater as normal. You have no worries or qualms about it whatsoever. And you're going in the repeater repeats it out, comes back to your PDN node, receives it, and goes down wires X. No one's the wiser. Okay. Who else had a question? Oh, those two guys are. You moved on me. We're watching you.
If I forget to disconnect when I leave a room and I go in another room, now am I in both?
No. A room cannot connect to a room. So if we were to go ahead and here, for example, I'll connect to, we'll bug the zombie alert people again. And now all of a sudden it says, shoot, you know what? I want to go back to my room. I can go to connect to, and then I can go to 21667. It's just going to go ahead and drop me out of that room and go to another. Wires X does not allow a room to connect to a room, because otherwise it could be wholly daisy chained out for who knows long. And if you've ever been on All-Star and someone decided to find out you have All-Star and start just connecting, I've seen like on the bubble graph, like link, and it's horrible. So yeah, we don't allow room to a room.
You used to have auto mode select for PDN for HRI, right? Wasn't that an option where if you came in analog, it would go out analog?
No, so in Wires X, for HRI 200, you have to select either analog or digital. AMS would only be for the repeater side of it, but then you have to select what mode in the repeater goes down Wires X.
Okay.
So that's where that kind of confusion happens, because someone will run AMS on a repeater, and then, hey, my analog users aren't going down. Well, because you only selected digital, you can only have one or the other.
Okay. And then the other one was, if I was to use the 145/5625, I'd have to use the radio 2 port and like another digital radio as my signal, basically.
Correct.
It's just going to listen on 145/5625.
Correct. So
it'll send the rest of the data to the radio, and then it will automatically change on that person's radio.
Correct. So for an example, let's say radio 1, which we'll call the voice channel, is 147.0 for argument's sake, right? And radio 2 is 145/5625. So what would happen is radio 2 only sits and listens for the handshake command from Wires X radios, okay, or Fusion radios that can send it. When it hears it, it will say, oh, hey, you want to connect to my node? Yeah, I'll let you, okay, you're going to now go to 147.000. The radio is going to go beep, 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 sounds like the Addams Family theme, and it's going to go beep, beep, beep. You'll notice your radio now has changed to the voice channel and is in VFO mode.
Okay. That doesn't work when an FTM 6000.
It does not, no, because that's analog only.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Is there a way in the Wires X software to schedule a connection?
There's not. There's not. The reason being, the concept behind it is that it was, once again, a terminal user interface and not so much as a, per se, remote user interface. It has those room safety features in there, because people say, well, why can't you do it? You can do the room thing on there. That's more of a fail-safe, so like if I'm away from here in Wisconsin and all of a sudden my room starts to go haywire, I can set up those safeguards. But there's no scheduling system in there or anything to do it. Part of the reason for that is because it's not server-based. It doesn't know if that device is going to be online. So let's say you want to go to the zombie alert room, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say I want it to go every Monday night at 8 p.m. You're going to have a net now, Monday night at 8 p.m., okay? Now, if it says, hey, Monday night at 8 p.m., I want to go to that, if that's not on, what does the device do? Exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing. It's like, what do you schedule? How do you do it? You know, that kind of thing. So that's why there's no scheduling built into it, because it's not a true server-based system on there. So that's why there's no scheduling.
All right. I have one more question, if I may. All right, so you said at the beginning of the presentation you were going to talk about how to have multiple devices on within your residence existing together. I have one question that might kind of dig into that. So can you have an HRI 200 and a PDN on the same IP address?
Yes.
The same outward facing, okay.
Yep, that's the nice part about PDN. PDN does not require static, static's the wrong word. It does not require a global non-NATed IP address. It goes through and it comes up through the system like a switch, okay? So instead of physical connections, it's saying, okay, I'm going and I'm talking into there. I'm looking at the system, but I'm going through a switching network instead of a direct connection, so it reroutes it for you as a PDN. It's not technically server-based, okay? But in that case, since PDN doesn't require that address, it doesn't care an IP address, doesn't care whatever, where the HRI 200 does. So when you have both on at home, like I do, PDN's like, I don't care, I'm just going out the internet to, in essence, the sort of back door, I guess we could say, of the Wires X system. So therefore, it's like, okay, I don't care.
All right.
Yep.
Any other questions? Can a room be disconnected after interactivity?
Can or what?
Room be disconnected after interactivity?
Can disconnect it to activity?
Inactivity.
No. So the room and your node ID are always paired together, if you notice that. And you notice it's a one step over. It's a 10,000 step is actually what we kind of call it as. So for example, my room is 11667, my room 21667. This node here, 33369. If I connect an HRI 200 to it, the room would be 43369. The pairing always will take place that way. So if you have a room active and no one's in it, guess what? It's not active. We're not going to shut down a room. We can't disable a room. The only way for you to turn off your room is to go into the software when it's set up with the HRI 200 and uncheck the room from being active. There's a activate room check. You uncheck it. That's how you turn off the room.
One more question.
Mm-hmm.
Given that all of the room numbers are 5 digits, is there a contingency plan for expansion going beyond whatever that can accomplish?
Yes, we have been contacting the people that have been like setting up, have had nodes and stuff on there for a long time and have been off the air. Like we have not seen a connect request for them in a while. Some of the numbers we have seen have not been on since like December of 2014. We are reaching out to them slowly on there. And, we've had people that said, oh, yeah, it's not, I'm not active anymore, or that kind of thing, or if it's a silent key or something like that on there. So it is there. I think you'll be able to see the list grow more and more. We started out with a 5-digit series based on sort of regional and country codes. So if you actually take a look at it, the USA, we were 333s, but if, for North America, it should say that. But if we actually take a look, and we go down further, I'll do this a little bit here. So this is the Philippines. Notice they're 5-9s, but then if we go down a little bit more for the node numbers, Poland's are 1-8s and 1-7s. So the numbering system we know, but there's a lot of numbers still in the system that are unused. But so many people think like, oh, you're 11167. Well, now your room is 21667, so we went, next one is 668, 669, 670, and it's not. There's partitions for the world. 65111. Yeah, and I think, if I remember correctly, 6-4s. And you can kind of see on there, but like here, so we'll just use it here. So for an example, 7-0s, 7, like so here, Argentina started the 71,000 block. And in the North America, we were the 70,000 block. And if you go ahead and take a look at the 72,000 block, that went down to, that's back to Canada, and then Argentina. So you just see it kind of bounces around like North America, South America, those kind of things on there. So,
Any other questions?
oh, what up here?
This has to do with the software installation. I had it on a computer that has since crashed, and I'm going to reinstall the software. You mentioned about having specific information that you have to put back into it. What if I don't recall or have any idea what that is?
So if you don't save the email, you don't have that in there, you can log back in with your WiresX account. All that information is hard-coded in WiresX. If you don't have your password or you forget your username, you can go to there, and by using the serial number of your device and those kind of things, you can go ahead and, you know, log in and recover the stuff on there. That has all that information on there. What I usually tell people, and it's a good rule of thumb, everybody's got a, you know, label maker, right? You know, everybody got one for Christmas when they were 12. What I do is, like on this one here, I have it on the back of that. I have, and it says ID 33369. So I know if I'm going to get a different computer, or yeah, I had to reboot things and retry activation is what they call it. Then I look back, okay, yeah, this is the so I know this number, and then I pull up the DPID out of there. Now, case in point, if you upgrade software, you will not lose anything, okay? So like I went from version 1.54 to 1.55, didn't lose anything. Kept my settings, kept everything like that. It just updated what it needed to do.